We have an amazing guest today. Her name is Michelle Collison. She is an entrepreneur, author, and public speaker. She has dedicated her life to breaking boundaries and redefining success. In 2020, Michelle became a global movement aimed at unleashing the abundant potential within each of us. Her business, Mind Shift Theory, to ignite a ripple effect to transformation that raises well-being of 1 million people by 2027. Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you, Consuela. I am so excited to be here, and happy International Women's Day to everybody.
What an amazing day. Thank you for being here. So tell us a little bit about why you're so passionate around this mind shift theory.
Yeah, I actually have a two-part story, really. It all started back in 2020 when I started my business in the early days of the COVID lockdown, right? When the world was going crazy. We had two young kids at the time. My kids were 6 and 9, and I was determined during this lockdown process to minimize the mental and emotional impact that it was having on my kids. And so I designed a kids journal for them to help them focus on growth mindset. And this journal we produced and we sold on our website. And then part two, really, in 2022, after years and years of helping other people focus or keep a positive mindset, I had a small tragedy of my own. My retina detached and I became blind almost overnight. And so I subsequently had 4 different eye surgeries over the course of 9 months. And I remember this was one of the lowest periods or lowest points in my life. But I had already, in the past, I'd already created a journaling habit, which I can honestly say that journaling practice saved my life. And that's when I had this aha moment, right? That everyone can benefit from journaling, not only kids, all adults of all ages and stages. And so now we've developed products for everybody, journaling products to help you use the power of the mind really to create the future that you desire.
Wow. Wow, Michelle. So that's a lot of surgery in a short period of time. That is a lot mentally to handle, right? To go from seeing to not being able to see the next day, and then having to deal with surgery after surgery. That is a lot to carry. So I'm interested. So you talked about journaling. So we are going to talk about journaling today. So tell us, like, how did you started with journaling before, and you're saying that it saved your life. So tell us more about how does journaling save one's life?
Well, I truly believe that there's not one perfect journal that fits everybody, right? I think it's a very personal decision. And I think everyone can find the perfect type of journal that fits exactly what they need at this particular point in their life. And there are so many different types of journals. I can list a few, but I'd love to encourage the audience too, if you can type in the chat box different types of journals, either that you use or that you're aware of. And I can name a few. Like I said, there are things like gratitude journals, affirmation
That seems like a
journals.
big one. Everybody talks about a gratitude journal.
There's
I know
affirmation.
I've done some big wins journaling. So my big wins journal is at the end of each day, I write down 3 big wins for the day.
That's
Because
awesome.
often, as an entrepreneur, I can feel like, man, did I even accomplish anything today? Right. And so to alleviate that, it's like, no, these are the really cool things I did today. Right. And so keeping track of them that way, it's not necessarily keeping track, but it's a way to like recognize that I did something each day so I don't let that feeling of I don't get anything done overtake me. So that's one I use, but I'd love to hear. So we're getting full moon and new moon journal,
Wonderful.
daily journal, self-love journal. I know we just went through February. There was a lot of talk on the socials about self-love. Are there
And
any that we're missing yet? Any journals that we've missed?
there are things like affirmation journals, which I think, Consuelo, are very similar to what you mentioned earlier, where you're saying positive things about yourself or positive things that you did in the day. There are things like habit trackers or streams of consciousness journals. There are so many different journaling types. But I'm not here to, like I said, to point out just one journaling type. I think it's a very personal decision, and everyone can find the journaling type that works best for them. And that's what I want to talk about, how to find the journaling type that works best for you. And I was listening to Elizabeth de Moraes talk a while back, and she described herself as a professional recovering serial undercover self-saboteur. And this really resonated with me. I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel like I've self-sabotaged every aspect of my past. So I've even made the shirt. I don't know if you can see it. Yep.
Yes, yes. Rehabilitated self-sabotage expert.
Expert.
Love that. I
So
also love the rehabilitated part. Like, yes, like I'm moving on.
and like I said, I felt like I had been self-sabotaging myself in my past all along in two key areas. One was my career, and the other was my health or my weight. If I think about my career, I feel like it's taken me forever to find my perfect career or find my perfect job. I've changed jobs so many times. I've quit jobs. I've been fired from jobs, like you name it. I feel like every time it felt like I was self-sabotaging my own career. And the same happened with my weight. I've never been a skinny girl. I feel like I've always been trying to lose weight for as long as I can remember. I even remember going to Way Less weigh-ins with my mom, I think at age 15 or 16. I tried different types of diets. I've been yo-yo dieting, always looking for external solutions, but always quitting, like nothing stuck. And so for years and years, I asked myself, like, am I just not meant to be fit and healthy? And why is it that I keep self-sabotaging? And so I've spent the last 7 years learning about the power of journaling, learning about the brain and the mind and how everything works. And I found a lot of research to prove just how journaling helps you really overcome self-sabotage and helps you achieve all of the things you want to in life.
Well, that's timely, I would say, for me today to listen to your talk. Self-sabotage, I think there isn't one of us in the room today that hasn't had a bout with self-sabotage, right? Like all of us at some point have had to deal with that. When you're talking about the health and the career, those are like two big areas for me, especially when I worked for someone else. Oh my goodness, I'd be doing amazing, and then next thing you know, I do something that would totally cause me trouble, right? All the diets, try all the diets, stick with them for a bit, and then throw them over, right?
Yeah.
So where do I go? Like this might be something I need to be doing. How do I get started with journaling specifically to become rehabilitated self-saboteur?
And this is almost what I loved about journaling, because instead of finding a solution, what journaling helps you realize is that you already have the solution inside you, that you already have all the answers you need. And what journaling does is it helps you take everything that's inside your head and put it down on a piece of paper, and helps you understand so many different things about the brain, and helps you really think about your thinking. To make sense of this, I think I want to talk about three important concepts that are important to understand, if that's okay, Consuela.
Yes, because I think all of us can benefit with how to think about our thinking. I don't know if you guys caught that, but we need to know better how to think about our thinking. I love that.
Awesome, thank you. And I've created these little post-it notes to put up here so that people can remember. Because the first thing that I want to talk about, if you can see that, is circumstance versus experience. You see that one?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, so understanding the difference between circumstances and experience, because these two things, circumstance and experience, are always going on at the same time, simultaneously. There is the circumstance, the event that happens, right, in our lives, whatever it is. like my flight was delayed by an hour, or I got fired from my job, or my husband came home late, right? Whatever the thing is, that's the circumstance. But my experience can be very different to that particular circumstance. I can have many different reactions or different experiences depending on what I like to call the zip code in my head, right? The place I call home inside my head. I can react or have a different experience to these circumstances. And if I use the flight delay as an example, and if anyone's had a flight delay of more than an hour, just type yes in the comments. But I'm sure you can relate, like flight delays can be annoying. But my experience of this flight delay can be very different depending on this zip code or the current place I call home inside my head. For example, as an example, my experience could be something like, this airline is the worst. Surely they knew this was going to happen. They could have informed us earlier. Their employees at the desk are absolutely useless. I paid for a flight home today. They'd better be compensating me for this. Right? That could be one experience we could have to this flight delay. Or my experience could be, oh, well, I'll just grab a coffee and wait. Luckily, I bought a good book to read. Or my experience of the flight delay could be, thank freaking goodness, they're fixing whatever needed fixing on the plane before we took off, considering all the crazy stuff that's happening in the air these days. So there are many different experiences that we can have to the same circumstance, but we tend to treat these two domains of circumstance and experience as if they're one and the same, as if the circumstance causes our experience, and as if we don't have any choice to have a different experience. But the magic is that we actually do, that we can actually choose to have a different experience. And that's one of the ways that journaling helps us. Because when we're journaling, and like I said, taking everything from in our heads and putting it down on paper, this helps us to separate our circumstances from our experience and helps us understand that one doesn't necessarily cause the other.
I love that. I'm putting that in the chat for everybody. I think that is massive. So I do a bit of flying, and it's always interesting when they announce there's going to be a delay to even observe. Like if you like to watch people, observing everybody's different responses and then the experience that they're choosing around a delay, right?
Yeah.
Around, I was just on one where it was delayed. There was a maintenance issue. I was at a really tiny airport where they had to call maintenance. And when I say they had to call maintenance, y'all, maintenance was located across town. Like it wasn't at the airport. So like, oh, we're gonna have to call. I'm like, and so people that knew, like, oh boy, this could be like and a bad thing, and we were gonna be in danger of even making it out of there today. And even if we do, we're all gonna miss our connections. And so there was a lot of different range of experiences. One of the things I know, at least around flying, that I've done is that now that I'm a speaker, this is my new story. Now that I'm a speaker, flying is the easiest thing I do. And so no matter what, it's going to work out. And by having that set, whenever something happens like this, I'm primed to choose the good experience. So that's one area that I'm like, I've got handled. But it is interesting to watch everybody. Nobody's having the same experience, right? Everybody is making their own choice, whether they realize it or not. And I think this is great to bring to our attention that it is our choice. We're making the choice on what our experience is going to be. So lovely point to facilitate this
It's
reducing
great.
self-sabotage.
It's great, Consola, that you mentioned these different experiences that you observed in other people, because our experiences are really formed by our past experiences, right? What our current experiences are so determined by the things that have happened to us in the past. And this actually leads me perfectly to our next point, which is about neuroplasticity. I'll pop it right there, right? So neuroplasticity, for those that don't know, is the brain's ability to continuously change and strengthen neural networks in response to repeated experiences in our life. And we all have very, very hardwired programming that's been formed over decades and decades of the same experiences happening over and over again. And this programming really forms the basis of our personality. And so you can understand how the way we react to our experience to a particular event is so linked to experiences that we've had in the past, because our brains have actually been trained to recognize a trigger and have the same response or have the same emotion or reaction. And through understanding this neuroscience of it, we start to understand that we can actually train our brain to do something different. I know that can sound crazy, but our brains are amazing, and we can learn anything we want, right? At any point at any time in our life, we can learn. And I'm leveling up to 48 this year. I don't like to use the word age. I say I'm reaching level 48. But if I wanted to, right now, I
I'm
can.
like, level what? Where are the levels? I need to learn more about these levels.
Yeah. I'm reaching level 48 this year. And at any point in my life, I can learn a new language. In fact, I recently moved to Spain, so right now I'm learning Spanish. I can learn a musical instrument if I wanted to. I can learn a new habit. I can learn a new way of thinking. In fact, I can become a different person if I wanted to, right? And this is the awesomeness about neuroplasticity, is that at any point in our life, we can train our brain to do something different.
I love that. And you know what they say, like what percent of our brain that we actually are using, right? And I feel sometimes, not to compare it to technology, but if you have a smartphone, right? Like what percentage of the phone are you actually using versus what it's capable of doing? And I feel like that's the same with my brain. Like, well, I know it's able to do a lot more things, but I stick to the same things I already know. But it's able to bring us so much more. We just have to explore that and be willing to and open to exploring new things that it can do for us.
And that's exactly what I really realized, Consuela. You said our brains, and it's true, our brains like to stick to what it already knows because that's the comfort zone, that's the comfortable
It's
place.
that worn path, right?
Exactly. But once you realize this, you realize that you actually have the power to change it. You can create a different, comfortable place, right? And it starts with journaling, because journaling, again, it helps you put all those thoughts and ideas and feelings and emotions onto a piece of paper and start to process it in a way that you can use it to help yourself. Um, it also, one of the other things I wanted to mention is about habits, right? So you, just as we have had habitual practices in the past that have created our current habits, we can create new habits. We can create any new habit that we want to. And journaling helps us to start that process.
Awesome. So we need to get started with journaling. So what's the next thing we need to know?
So there's one more concept I want to talk about, and this is called a thoughts and feelings loop. Let me just pop it right there. Our thoughts and feelings loop, right? It's also about neuroscience, but we're talking here about hormones and not about neural synapses. There's a lot of scientific research that shows that negative thoughts in our mind, they trigger stress chemicals in our body. Stress chemicals like cortisol and adrenaline. And, the body is absolutely amazing. The brain is amazing. It does what it needs to at any point in our life. So there are times when we need higher, raised cortisol or raised adrenaline, and times when we are actually in danger and we need to take urgent action. But actually, any negative thought triggers those same stress chemicals in our body. And at the same time, on the other side, positive thoughts trigger feel good chemicals in our body, like dopamine and oxytocin and serotonin and endorphins. And these chemicals, when they're produced inside our body, we experience feelings. And then when our brain consciously registers these feelings, our conscious mind creates thoughts to justify those exact same feelings. And so it begins a loop, right? So the thoughts trigger more of the same chemicals. And it's just a continuous loop in our body. Our thoughts lead to feelings, our feelings lead to actions, and actions will lead to whatever the result is of those actions. And so, in linking this to journaling, I think like a logical approach would be to use journaling to create intentional thought patterns of our choosing. So, if we wanted to, for example, use a gratitude journal to keep us focused on the good things that we want in life, we can do that. Uh, Using a gratitude practice every day, thinking about the positive things that have happened, and that will actually produce feel good chemicals in our brains like dopamine that will want us to continue to do the same thing. So there's this thoughts and feelings loop that happens naturally in our body. And we can use all of these three concepts together with journaling to create the future we desire, to change any habits that we want, really by taking small steps one at a time.
Well, this is amazing, eye-opening for me as someone who has some run-ins with self-sabotage. So I know you have a free gift for everybody who's here today. Tell us a little bit about your free gift.
Yes, absolutely. I have, and it's going to be shared in the chat, right?
Yes, they will put the link in the chat for us.
Perfect, perfect. On our website, which is um, mindshifttheory.io, we have a habit challenge. I have used habits in the past to make so many changes in my life. I started with a running challenge or a movement challenge where especially it was just after my eye surgery, where I had gained a lot of weight and I wasn't as fit and healthy as I wanted to. And I created a challenge for myself to move my body every day for 75 days. And I used 75 days because I had tried 30-day habits in the past and they hadn't worked. I tried 21-day habits and they hadn't worked. And so I challenged myself to just stick to movement every day for 75 days. And it was hard initially, but I started small. I started just by walking, and then I started by running a little bit more, a little bit, and a little bit more every day. And eventually, after 75 days, I realized I'd actually formed this habit where I no longer have to think about running. It's just something I do, something that comes naturally, which is what a habit is, right? Like brushing your teeth in the morning, it's just something you do. And I used habits also to challenge the way I thought about sugar. This was another idea I had. I always thought I had a sweet tooth. I always thought I overate things like chocolates or candy. And I thought I was an emotional eater. So I challenged myself for 75 days to stop eating added sugar. And I didn't go crazy, like cut out every single type of sugar. I still ate fruits, for example, but it was just the added sugar of things like no more sugar in my coffee, no more candy. And I paid attention to the added sugar in things like uh, food sources, or I cut out sodas, for example. And again, it was over the 75 days, near the end of the 75 days, that I realized the changes that had happened both in my body and in my mind. I actually lost weight during this process, which wasn't the idea of the challenge wasn't about losing weight, but I did lose the weight that I needed to. I also changed how I thought about sugar. We have a 75-day challenge program, which is in the link. And if you follow that link, it'll take you through the 75-day challenge. You can find a habit that you're wanting to build for yourself and follow the program to make that change in your life.
And then, real briefly, Michelle, what are some final last words for everybody before we end today?
There is just one final last word, really. It's about every day taking the small step in the direction that you want to go, because that will lead you there. It's just one every day taking one more small step.
Every day taking one step. I love that. Thank you, Michelle, for being with us today. This has been really eye-opening. I can't wait to get started on some of these things. And thank you for being part of Voices of Women Summit.
Thank you for having me, Consuela.